Hey guys! I said in my last video that my face would be all swollen for a couple of days and that I probably wouldn't be making a video this week, or if I was, that you wouldn't be looking at my face. But as you can see, my face is fine. The dental surgery actually didn't go ahead because it turned out I had a sinus infection last week and the dentist didn't want to go ahead with it when I had an infection so close to the whole kind of area of the tooth. So unfortunately it's been postponed until January. This whole dental situation is really dragging out now, and I missed a week from work anyway because I was sick. But I'm finally healthy again, which is great, and I'm also a tiny bit relieved that I didn't have to have the dental surgery done yet, because it's no fun and I'm really not looking forward to having it done again. So I'm kind of literally back from work about 10 minutes or so. And I usually would be doing my yoga practice now before dinner. I like to get it done kind of when I get back from work first thing. Mostly to make sure that I'll actually get around to doing it, but also because I find that I'm usually so tired when I get back from work that I'm not actually going to do anything else productive in that time. But because I've been sick and I'm actually feeling fine right now, I'm feeling quite energetic and work was fine and everything, I thought maybe I'd do a video now rather than later, because I'm probably going to crash at some point in the evening. And also when I was walking on my way back from work, the idea popped into my head of talking about my rituals. Talking about maybe the structure of my rituals, what they're like, how they work, what I do in them, why I do them, all that kind of thing. Because it's not something I've really gone into specific detail about yet here on this channel. Mostly because it's something I have talked about on the blog, and when I was creating the first couple of kind of introductory videos for the channel, I was kind of aware that I was repeating information that I'd already given on my blog, and I didn't really want there to be too much repetition. Particularly because some people, I tend to post, actually I post all my YouTube videos on my blog as well and write a little bit about them. So there are people who'd be watching the videos who have already been, following my blog for quite some time and that kind of thing. But I did mean to make an introductory video about ritual because it's obviously such a central part of pretty much, I would say, probably all pagan practices. Maybe not all, that's probably being a little bit too presumptuous, but an awful lot of pagan practices anyway are pretty much centered around ritual. And ritual is definitely the driving force for me, for my spirituality. It all kind of stems from the need for ritual, the need to do ritual. And that was maybe one of the things I missed most when I considered myself to be an atheist and when I was completely a-religious. I missed the idea of the divine and having the idea of a greater power and feeling in some way safer or slightly looked after, that kind of feeling. I definitely missed that feeling, which was probably something that I was going to lose as I got older anyway, because my view of the divine now doesn't really fit that idea of a divine that is in some way looking after me, obviously, as I don't believe in personal deity. So it's become a different thing for me. But I would say more than anything I missed the ritual. And when I initially came back to paganism, I don't know how many years ago it was now, maybe 3. It was kind of when I first moved into this flat, actually, because it was the first time I moved away from home. I had stayed at home to do my undergraduate, which is normal in Ireland, firstly because the universities don't tend to be far away from home. It's a small country. I was going to a university in Dublin. My parents live in Dublin and there didn't seem to be a need to move out. And also just because renting is so expensive here, especially in Dublin. It's really quite ludicrously expensive. So I didn't move out until I was doing my master's, and then it was just because it was time to move. But when I moved out, it gave me an awful lot of freedom that I hadn't had when I was living with my parents, to explore things that I probably wouldn't under their roof. And yes, my father was disapproving of my paganism, of my delving into paganism when I was a teenager, but it wasn't even so much that. It's more that you feel more self-conscious when you're living with other people. You kind of don't have that freedom to just say, okay, well, I'm going to sit here in the room and I'm going to light a few candles and I'm going to see what happens, or whatever. Well, I would say first for me, what came first was the books. I think I bought a few new books and started rereading my old books first, but that very quickly stemmed into it very quickly turned into me actually sitting down and doing ritual. And I didn't really know why initially, I just felt the need to. So ritual for me is, it's not, I don't call it circle casting, and I don't technically cast a circle in the way that Wiccans do. But it is largely informed by that practice, because my original kind of pagan learning, my pagan practice, was very Wicca influenced. So the whole idea, the whole structure behind the ritual and how it works and the different components to it is very much inspired by that kind of neo-pagan / Wiccan structure to things that is so common amongst neo-pagans. But I wouldn't say that I call it casting a circle. I don't know that I would even consider it to be creating sacred space, because I'm not altogether sure how I feel about the practicalities of what that means, and is it really possible to make a space sacred? Obviously it is, maybe in terms of psychology, that you're creating a space that you psychologically feel is different. But I still do mark the quarters. That's one of the main things that I've taken away from my Wiccan background, maybe, when it comes to the kind of circle, or I should say ritual kind of structure. So I mark the 4 quarters still with candles, and my first thing that I do is I go around and I light those candles and I speak a few words. I mentioned in a previous video that I've now stopped associating those quarters with the elements, and I've started associating them with ancestors, which is a new thing for me. And it's kind of, what I actually do is I go back around the circle again after the initial kind of round, and then I address the ancestors as a separate thing to my initial kind of going around the circle and lighting the candles, because the initial going around for me has to be quite simple. It's the way that I sort of state to myself that I'm starting ritual now. The actual structure of the ritual has changed quite a lot. It kind of varies according to my mood. It has varied just according to how my practice has evolved, and some things have disappeared from it, other things have come in and become stronger. But the way I think of it, it has kind of 3 core components, and any one of these components can be greater or less important at any one time. And those 3 components for me are what I would call goddess or cosmos. Now that goddess, that can either just be unqualified goddess, it can be God / DES, if you see what I mean, to kind of suggest a more not gender neutral, but gender inclusive kind of term. But generally speaking, in ritual I do use both the words goddess and cosmos, and to me goddess is usually referring to the divine feminine. But it's not that I completely exclude the masculine from my ritual. That's just the kind of personal, human-like metaphor that works best for me. That's the anthropomorphization. I always stumble over that word when I'm pronouncing it. That just gels best with me. So the first component is the cosmos goddess component. The second component would be what I would consider an earth-based component, and that incorporates the 4 cardinal directions, and it also incorporates the elements. Now the elements for me, as I've mentioned before, are I kind of address them as the states of matter, but I don't really go into plasma, because actually if you're including plasma, as I said before, there are a couple of other states of matter that exist as well outside of Earth. But I do acknowledge a sort of fire element as the sun or energy, which is basically like plasma. So rather than it being earth, air, fire, water, what I acknowledge in my ritual is solid, gas, liquid and energy. And as I stated before as well, more usually for me that will turn into earth, rain or sea, and sky or wind. So even though the underlying thinking behind it for me is about the states of matter, in terms of poetry and in terms of ritual language, I prefer to make it more experiential and more about what we actually see on Earth and how we actually experience it. And then of course there's sun and the energy of the sun, and I kind of tie that together. So all of those different things will be part of the sort of earth element for me, what's happening on the earth. And when I'm doing one of the Sabbats, one of the 8 kind of holy days of the Wheel of the Year, when I'm doing ritual for one of those, that will be more kind of earth centered, because of course those days are based around the movement of the earth around the sun. So it's very much based on our own earth rather than the whole cosmos. But of course, you know, when I'm acknowledging those changes that happen on earth in those seasons, it's definitely, I like to see it as representing an overall trend in the cosmos. And then the third component would be the ancestors. And ancestors to me actually incorporates gods or deities, which might seem a little bit strange to some. I know some pagans do kind of tie those together and some definitely don't. And it's not necessarily that I think that my ancestors, or that the gods are ancestors or are my ancestors, or that they were real people, and that's where I'm going with that. It's more that when I talk about ancestors and deities, I'm talking more about the human psyche. Obviously, the ancestors, when I acknowledge ancestors within ritual, I do like to go, as I said before, all the way back to the Big Bang, and I include not only human ancestors but all of animals and life, and even before life, just the earth itself and stars and everything that we've actually come from. But in terms of human ancestors, that's where the kind of connection with gods comes in. So you could also see it in a sort of 3-tiered kind of structure as well, that at the top or on the outside of the circle, if you see it as 3 circles, one inside the other, on the outside is cosmos / goddess, then next is earth. So we're narrowing in a little bit more, and that includes, like I say, that can include non-human ancestors as well. That's just everything around us that we experience, and that's our own experience of cosmos is earth. And then within that, it's kind of the psyche and the self. And for me, as I've said, deities are archetypes. So I think I could probably say that for me they are definitely completely happening within the mind. And that's not to say that they're not powerful and not separate from our consciousness and separate from our ego. I definitely think there are entities, or I don't know if entities is the right word, but there are parts of our minds that can act in a way that seems, or even you could say is, quite separate to the conscious or ego part of our minds that we consider to be me or ourselves. And that's what the gods are to me. So in terms of tying together those different parts of ritual, it's quite fluid for me, and it definitely changes from time to time. I start with acknowledging the cardinal directions, but I don't necessarily then continue with the rest of the earth stuff. I tried that for a while, kind of segregating them into separate parts, and I used to do earth first, and then I think ancestors, and then cosmos. What I've been finding recently is that I prefer to actually acknowledge goddess or cosmos quite early on in the ritual. So I'll actually go around and light the cardinal directional candles, and then I'll come back and then I will acknowledge cosmos. I acknowledge goddess or cosmos as a kind of, it's inspired from the triple goddess. I wouldn't call it triple, but that's definitely where it started from. It's turned into it's actually turned into a more binary, dualistic kind of way of seeing it for me now, which I might have mentioned on this channel before, I don't quite remember, but it started out as Maiden, Mother and Crone. And this is an idea that I got from, you've guessed it, Pagan Cosmology by Glenys Livingstone. And but quite quickly the mother aspect started to incorporate the other two for me, because the mother aspect was all about, for Glenys Livingstone, is all about the connectivity of everything, and it just seemed quite overarching to me, and it started to represent, for me, I started to call it Gaia, and it started to be the all. It started to be Cosmos, or Goddess herself, or himself. And then Virgin and Crone for a long time remained Virgin and Crone, but I wasn't quite happy with that because I wasn't completely happy with the imagery that evoked. And then that became eventually creation and destruction for me, which obviously makes it a lot more definitely binary rather than the original Virgin, Mother and Crone. And I like that a lot more. That's really stuck for me. That's become pretty much the central part of my ritual, is acknowledging those three things. I will start with Cosmos or Goddess as a whole and the interconnectivity of it, and then I will address the light or the creative force of Cosmos, and then I will address the dark or the destructive force. There's a little bit of talk about deities in there as well. I evoke a certain amount of deities, usually just associated with the light and the dark aspects. And I've started more recently to associate the light with Gaia and the dark with the Morrigan. Now, Gaia, as I might have mentioned, I did mention before on the channel, for me used to actually be the all, or Cosmos, or Goddess. Gaia was the name that I used to evoke that, but I started to feel like it was more and more problematic, and particularly when I started to split Cosmos in my acknowledging of it and in my embracing it and in my celebration of it, when I started to split it into light and dark and creation and destruction, Gaia seemed more and more to me to really be about the creative aspect rather than the destructive. And then the Morrigan for me also always seemed very important, and as important as Gaia, as important a figure to me as Gaia. So it's kind of made sense now that they've ended up balancing each other out as the light and dark. I'm really enjoying that. I'm finding that works very well for me. Funny enough, the earth-based part of the ritual is actually the part that has suffered the most when it comes to how much it's faded in comparison with the rest of the parts of my ritual. Which is a pity, because obviously a huge part of my spirituality and spiritual practice is based on the earth. It's based on the earth's movement around the sun and the way what we experience on earth, and the cycles of life and death and all of that, and light and dark. But I've been feeling a little bit disconnected from, I suppose, the elements, or the states of matter thing hasn't really been working for me anymore, and I'm thinking that I might have to find a different way of doing that. And something I came across online recently, and I'll link it below actually off the top of my head. Oh, Rua Lupa is the name of the blogger. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm pronouncing it the way I would in Irish, but I don't know if that's yeah, I'd have to assume that that's how to pronounce the name, but that's the name of the blogger. And I'm probably misremembering this now, but she was talking about the idea of the importance for her in her practice of the sun and the sun's energy, and the kind of passing of energy from plant to animal, you know, from the sun to the earth to plants to animals, and the cycle of energy that happens with that. And then when the animals and the plants die and decay back into the earth, then the cycle continues, and all of this is put into motion by the energy of the sun. That's something that really struck a chord for me, a lot more than anything I have been doing before. But the difficult thing with ritual is always, I mean, you can have an idea in your head, an intellectual idea in your head, like a kind of academic kind of thought, but it doesn't necessarily translate immediately into ritual, because obviously ritual is something completely different. Ritual is something that has to click with the unconscious. It has to click with the right brain, the right hemisphere. Not that I buy into the actual physical idea of right brain and left brain, but the idea of the right brain, the intuitive and non-verbal artistic part of the brain. So it can be kind of hard to translate those conscious thoughts into a ritual format that really works. So I'm still working on that. I haven't really sat down and worked on it consciously yet. I feel like it'll probably just come together for me, maybe in ritual sometime, in the way that the ancestors idea has come together for me, because the ancestors was the first thing that really started to fall apart for me. I really didn't know where to go with that at all, and that's associating them with the four quarters so far is working really well. I think think that's basically covered all the main aspects of ritual. I veer a lot between calling it a circle, not calling it a circle, calling it sacred space, not calling it sacred space, announcing sacred space and not. That definitely varies a lot for me, but those three components have always been present from the first ritual that I actually wrote for myself and performed for myself, which was about a year and a few months ago now. All of those components have definitely been present. I'm going to leave it there for the moment. There's so much more I could talk about, but I don't want to let this get too long. But if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you want me to talk about a little bit more, please do comment and let me know, because I'm very happy to make more videos on ritual, and I probably will once I think about what areas I want to talk about a bit more, or specific questions or concerns about the practicalities of ritual and things like. I mean, I can find it hard to get around to doing ritual. That's one of my problems, because my ritual practice is quite formal and takes quite a long time to do. I often find that I will miss. I like to celebrate both the full moon and the dark moon every month. And I will find that I will miss one or other of those, and more in the last couple of months I've been maybe only managing one a month, which I really don't like, because then I do have meditation practice and yoga practice, which I do see as being at least semi-spiritual. I'll talk about them in another video as well. But I don't really have a simple daily practice that I actually have committed to and kept up. So when I start to miss one of my bi-monthly rituals, it starts to feel like I haven't done ritual in a really long time. But like I say, it can be hard to get around to doing it, because I'm not even at home in my own flat on my own that much, like maybe only 3 nights, not even 3 nights a week, because I'm either with my boyfriend, either my boyfriend is here, I'm in his house, or I'm in my parents' house. So if I have 2 nights a week to myself in the flat, that's probably about the amount I have, and the time just gets away from me. So I might talk a bit more about that as well, about how I've been fitting my spirituality in around a really busy schedule. I work almost pretty much full time, and you know, I've got a lot of other commitments and a lot of stuff on my plate. Okay, I'll leave it there for the moment, guys. I hope that was interesting for you. I'll talk to you again soon.